I'm Tony Miller here to talk to the Bram Stoker award-winning novelist Tom Deady. Tom is the author of the forthcoming YA horror, The Clearing, coming out from Vesuvian Books in August. Tom, thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
All right. Great to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure is all mine. The Clearing was inspired by true events. How did you learn about the incident? And can you tell me more about the real life case?
Sure. So I stumbled on a newspaper article that it was really just a headline on Facebook of all places that just mentioned this kid's dog that came trotting out of the woods one day with a human arm in its mouth, which, as a horror writer, that was like really cool for me that happened in real life. The real story actually goes really bonkers about it was during the Satanic Panic. It was in the late 70s, I believe, the actual case. And there was all this suspicion that there had been human sacrifices and a dog dug up one of the sacrifices. And, it really kind of spiraled into this big conspiracy type thing. But I didn't know that at the time. I just had the headline and I thought, that's a great way to start a story. So I started writing The Clearing. And as I progressed, I just made up my own backstory for the rest of it. But I did find later on that there's actually a nonfiction book about the case that's available. And of course, the name just jumped out of my head. But it basically talks about the cult aspect of it. And by the end of it, they kind of dispute the whole thing. And it was just like this girl that either died of exposure or maybe committed suicide. So it wasn't as exciting as my book, I hope. But so that's how I found out about it. And that's all it took to spark the idea.
It's an amazing idea. And the fact that it was set during the late 70s, early 80s Satanic Panic moment is spectacular, because that was truly, truly horrific.
It was. So the book, I moved the book up to modern times. It's the real life case that was back then. But yeah, I am kind of fascinated by all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a great documentary about it. I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but a really great documentary about the Satanic Panic.
There's an interesting new one on Netflix now called Sons of Sam.
Okay.
Where their theory is that Berkowitz didn't act alone and he was actually part of a cult. So, and of course that was like 77, 78. So it fits right in the time frame. Really fascinating stuff.
I'm going to have to watch it, because I do watch all of those crazy documentaries on Netflix.
Of course we do.
All the time. It's great. So your villain is very interesting. Is she based on a real life story, or was that something purely fictional?
The villain, Mama Bayol, is completely fictional. I just took, the cult aspect of it and said, who would make a really cool, a cool villain, but also a cool type cult leader. And so that's where I came up with the character. She's based on nothing that happened in real life, but only that happened in my imagination and how I picture things to happen, like down in New Orleans all the time with a lot of the ghost activity and, sometimes bizarre religious cult type activity down there. So totally fictitious, but hopefully she works.
So the two main characters in The Clearing are teenage girls. What actually made you decide to write from the female perspective instead of using a male protagonist?
A couple different things. One is I feel like in YA, there's a lot of male-based characters in the horror thriller type space, but I don't see as many female characters or girl characters in that space. They seem to be more of, straight mainstream coming of age type stuff with the female characters. So I thought that would be a good mix, because I have two grown daughters now, but when they were that age, I could see them reading The Clearing. And the other reason is I just like to challenge myself, and I thought it would be harder to write from a female perspective, especially a teenage girl, because I never was one. So hopefully I didn't screw it up too badly.
So you're actually based in Massachusetts, but the story itself is based in New Hampshire. Is there a reason why you use New Hampshire instead of Massachusetts?
Nothing specific other than I feel like the setting in the woods lent itself better to a New Hampshire where there's a lot more woods than there are. There's not a lot of open space in Massachusetts unless you go out west. And all my other books, for the most part, have been set in Massachusetts. So I just wanted to try something different. I didn't want to invade Mr. King's space in Maine. So I just picked New Hampshire.
That's it's an interesting change of venue instead of like a lot of writers live and write about where they live. So I think that that's quite interesting. And you have your first book, which you won a Bram Stoker for, Haven. Fantastic. Congratulations. I know it was a couple years ago, but that's such a prestigious honor to win a Stoker. Was Haven based on any real events?
It wasn't based on real events from the sense of like a newspaper story or anything like that. Haven's a very personal book for me. I wrote it over a period of about 15 years, believe it or not. So I would get on it really, really hard and be going at it. And then life would get in the way, and I was raising my daughters. And so it was like fits and starts that I wrote it. But a lot of Denny's experiences, the main character, come from things that happened to me as a boy, and obviously none of the creature stuff, but just some of the kind of side stories and the character development was based on some personal experiences. There is a scene where I describe part of the creature and how it got its taste for human blood. And that was actually based on, I don't know if you've seen this movie, it's got Brad Pitt in it. They're in Africa and they're hunting lions. The Ghost. I forget the name of it, but
I know it when you're talking about.
Yeah, it's The Ghost and the something. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a true story about two male lions that started hunting together, which is completely unusual. And they did get a taste for human blood, and they hunted humans basically. This happened back in turn of the century, I think. So part of that DNA gets into the creature. And that's why the creature has a taste for human blood. So that's the only thing that's very loosely my idea of science when I write is, but yeah, mostly it's kind of a tribute to my childhood and just a very nostalgic book about growing up in the 70s.
Awesome. So Haven is a story that takes place in 3 separate eras. I mean, I have a hard time writing about one era. How difficult was that to write and keep track of all the players and all the different streams of character development?
It was extreme. It wasn't hard to write. It was hard to put it all together at the end and make it fit. So like I said, I wrote it over such a long period of time. A lot of it was just individual scenes that would pop into my head. It wasn't written consecutively. So I'd think of this great scene and I'd write the whole scene, not knowing where in the book it would fit. So at the end, it's about 100 chapters. It's very short chapters. But basically I had index cards with the plot points and the dates spread out all over my dining room table and kind of shuffled them around until the story fit and made sense. And I had a couple beta readers that went through it and said, no, this timeline doesn't work out. You missed this. And so putting it all together at the end was difficult, but the process of actually writing it was a blast.
It sounds like it. So because it's different for there to be a male YA horror writer, most YA horror writers are female. And what made you decide to switch from adult horror to YA?
So a lot of my books end up having either a main protagonist or a secondary protagonist that are young. I don't know. It happens that way. I start out a story with an adult and all of a sudden there's this kid that's taken over the story. So when I realized that the whole coming of age type thing was kind of my wheelhouse, I decided that I could probably do more if I could write to a younger audience, because I think there are in any book, there's lessons to be learned. I mean, sometimes a story is just a story, but there's always themes and potential morals to be learned. And I think if I tackle subjects such as the death of a parent or domestic abuse, things like that, within the layered context of a horror story, maybe that'll help one kid, and he'll realize that there are other people like him, and he's not the only one going through this weird stuff at home. And I don't know, I just wanted to kind of switch gears and see if I could do it. So I'm really, really hoping this is going to work out.
Well, you won a Stoker, so it's obviously working out for you.
Yeah, that is still surreal. I still can't believe it.
Tom, thank you so much for meeting with me today, and I can't wait to read The Clearing.
Excellent. Looking forward to hearing your feedback, and thanks again for having me. This was great.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Take care.